Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024, and today we are discussing squash bugs, unprofitable but unavoidable crops, and getting stuff done. It's quite the party, so let's do it. All right, first, a quick reminder that I will not be doing shows the next 3 days. Well, actually the next 5 days because of the weekend, but I will be back on Monday, and then it should be normal until the Christmas break, as normal as the show gets, I guess. If I can get it done, there may be a Farmer Jesse video this weekend, though, for you YouTube folks, so at least be on the lookout for that. Yesterday was kind of awesome for me. I had one of those days where I just got stuff done. I got the podcast done in the morning with enough time to run some errands afterward, then got some extra stuff accomplished around the farm that needed to happen while listening to podcasts that I had neglected. In other words, I got the stuff I needed to get done and then some, and it felt great. I felt accomplishment, like viscerally. It put me in a great mood, and I mean that somewhat chemically. I could feel the dopamine. I think I forget sometimes how satisfying it is to just get the stuff done that I needed to get done. Not big, obvious stuff like harvest, but obligatory stuff like car registration or paying a tax or calling the bank or fixing a pipe or whatever. Okay, I haven't got to the pipe yet, but sometimes I find that I put stuff off that honestly I know deep down would be satisfying to accomplish. Or I forget how satisfying it is to accomplish the extra stuff. I think the reason I put off the, for lack of a more descriptive word, adulting stuff isn't that I don't want to do it. It's more that the extra stuff is just complicated enough that I don't want to use what little brain capacity I have left at the end of the day to try and find the time to either do it or research how to do it or both. And I'm going to assume we all have this list of things we are putting off. Phone calls we need to make, letters we need to send, papers we need to sign, pipes we need to fix, but actually fix them, and are avoiding them, when in reality, we would feel like absolute champs if we just went ahead and got them done. Accomplishing stuff is awesome, plain and simple. It's a good feeling to get stuff off your shoulders, but I also think it's easy to forget that fact because of capacity. We have full brains. We already have large lists of things that need to get done, so when something extra is thrown into the mix, it's not easy to view that as an opportunity to accomplish an extra thing, but more of an inconvenience. Also, there's the frequency factor. These extra and albeit often important tasks for the to-do list that don't pop up every day. That would actually make it easier because they'd be predictable and consistent. No, they like to trickle in slowly every few weeks until you realize there are 5 or 10 things sitting on your desk waiting to be dealt with. Then it's daunting because each one requires thoughtful brain power, like what do I need to bring to the county clerk to register my car? Or where did I put the address for this thing I need to send? Or who do I need to call to get an answer about this other thing? It's not like go plant the carrots, which how to do that is already kind of stored in my brain, or at worst, I know where the information is. For these other random tasks, there's always an extra step outside of the comfort or knowledge zone, and the brain is just stingy with its energy usage. It fights me when I need to do the extra things on my list. So anyway, I thought I would use this first segment of this episode as a public service reminder to just do that dang stuff that we're all avoiding. Embrace our inner Dypen Palmer, right? Last month, I started my winter workout routine, which you will recall that I dubbed my early resolution. And this month, I'm taking up getting the extra stuff done immediately when it comes up as my second early resolution. Because early resolutions for the win. Not just the big requisite adult stuff either, like car registration, but the little list stuff, the non-farm but requisite life stuff. It's also notably completely selfish as well. Yes, I'm getting the things done that I need to get done, but the feeling of accomplishing those things, that's what I'm actually after. It's a win-win. So I feel like a champ, and I actually get the stuff done I need to get done. So anyway, yeah, that's what I'm thinking about today. Up next, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to keep it light for this December 3rd and talk about what veggies I grow just for the family, if any, BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Tilth Soil. Tilth Soil is a worker-owned co-op in Cleveland, Ohio, making NOP-compliant living soils for organic growers. Everything from Tilth is compost-based, and they divert around 4,000 tons of food scraps from landfills each year. I have used Tilth Soil for several years now for my plant starts. I love the results. I get consistent germination and consistent growth, plus excellent customer support. It's a lovably nerdy cast of folks who run Tilth. So start your season with excellent germination and strong transplants. Check out Tilth's pre-sale pricing for the 2025 season at tilthsoil.com. That's tilthsoil.com, and click Farmers. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast and would like to support it, you can over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I'm absolutely honored every time someone signs up over there, and I try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. Today's question comes from Patreon member Dwight Yoder, who writes, quote, "Not your childhood skateboarding buddy," that'll make sense in a second, "just a mountain unicycling solo pediatrician in Mobile, Alabama, Zone 9. My question is this: what do you grow for your family in your own garden? Specifically, what do you grow that is not profitable to raise, but you wish it was as a business? Thank you for providing me with the principles that have made my land productive," end quote. So great questions and fun questions, Dwight. And Dwight's comment about my skateboarding buddy was that I thought I had a friend a long time ago named Dwight Yoder, but was actually named Glenn Yoder, that I referenced at the end of the show when I was shouting Dwight out for supporting us. Glenn was always much better at skateboarding than me, so perhaps that's why I forgot his first name. I blocked it out. Also, we also just called him Yoder. Anyway, yes, what do I grow just for our family in our garden? Well, there isn't a ton that we grow that we don't also sell. However, there are a few things. And increasingly, as we continue to pull back our production, there will be more crops we grow that we do not try to sell. The first crop that comes to mind is watermelon. I know I've already talked about watermelon and my newfound obsession with growing organic seedless watermelons. And although we do sell some of that crop, watermelons are something that I cannot imagine ever making financial sense. To get anywhere near the price I would have to get to match lettuce or really make watermelons make financial sense on any scale, I mathed out that we would have to sell the melons at roughly $75 a piece. And that's the starting price in an awesome melon year. And even then, it's not making what lettuce makes, or radishes, or even green onions. I grow melons because I love watermelon juice for hydration, as Jane and I talked about in the episode we did on compost, and I might as well grow a few beds of them in the process, so the value for us actually comes from trading or gifting the melons to friends and neighbors because they are such a rare treat. Popcorn is another one we do not grow for the profit of it, but simply because the kids will eat it. We sell some, which basically pays for the seed and the labor and the fertility, but it is not one we really make a profit on. That said, corn in general is a crop that is underrated for its attraction to beneficials. The flowers get loaded up in the summertime, so I'm all about growing some popcorn and some dent corn, honestly, for cornmeal. Ditto sweet corn. To me, I have to eat some fresh sweet corn every year and freeze a bunch as well. Studies and tongues demonstrate that sweet corn will lose significant sweetness after harvest, especially if not refrigerated. Sweet corn, I think I just said refrigerated. Sweet corn can lose as much as 60% of its sweetness in the first 24 hours, converting the sugars to starches. To me, because I'm a spoiled farmer, buying sweet corn from a store is rarely worth it, so growing sweet corn is the only way to go for me. And then we will sell the extra to special customers at a $1 a year, which is profoundly undercharging. For the space it takes up and the time and the fertility requirements, like the watermelon, sweet corn should be closer to $5 or $10 a year or more. Again, though, sweet corn is a good trade or gift crop and a nice treat to reward your favorite customers with. Plus, I have a freezer full right now of corn, of shucked sweet corn for hashes and stuff in the winter, which is very exciting. We've grown some off the beaten path crops in the past, like yacon and crones, that I had no real intention of selling, I guess, at least not until I figured them out and found a market for them. They did okay, and it's nice to have unique flavors around like that, but ultimately we stopped growing each of those. I've also grown sunchokes that we could sell a bit, but at the time didn't have a huge restaurant clientele, so we mostly just ate them ourselves and enjoyed the flowers. Asparagus is another one that gets too neglected to really ever become a market item for us, and mostly just gets eaten raw in the garden, and we get like 2 meals out of it before the weeds take over because those beds are kind of neglected. It takes 3 years to establish asparagus, so it's not been my skill set effectively keeping those perennial beds from being too weedy. We also grow a lot of flowers that we don't sell and instead just use kind of in the house and give them to neighbors or to customers or just have them for the beneficials. Flowers are a crop we could really expand and make profitable though, unlike many of the others that are just hard to justify no matter what you do. For me, I love food and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily make sense financially, like honestly, sweet potatoes, which we do grow a lot of, but we also have the privilege of having enough space to produce some of those things that are less profitable for ourselves that some people won't necessarily. For some growers, every square foot is crucial to paying their mortgage, and those growers have to figure out ways to get some of those crops they can't justify growing either by trading with friends or perhaps growing out of containers or raised beds in less ideal locations, etc. For us, I love to grow what I love to eat, and as much as I can, I try to find a way to make financial sense, but sometimes that just means growing an extra bed of lettuce so I can justify growing a bed of watermelons or whatever it may be. I've also said this before, but I like growing caloric crops like potatoes and sweet potatoes and onions and staples like those that actually fill the belly. Lettuce is our bread and butter, while also ironically not being anything like bread nor butter. At least not calorically. So we need crops that feed people and fill them up, especially in times of need. We didn't grow nearly as many regular potatoes this year, and it kind of freaked me out, if I'm being honest. I love having potatoes on hand, not just to sell, but in case of local emergencies, we can have something to contribute. I said this before too, but a few years ago when there was all that flooding in eastern Kentucky, we sent a bunch of potatoes over there, and that was really cool to be able to do that. I want to always be in a position to contribute something. So to answer your question and add to it, I guess, Dwight, there are quite a few things we grow extra for our family and a few we grow extra for our community, and they don't always make financial sense. Anyway, when we come back, let's talk squash, another one that could arguably not make a ton of financial sense. Be right back. All right, so I'm trying to get through more of our November questions and catch up a bit on the Patreon page, and I thought this one from Patreon member Fuller Gardeners would be fun. They write, quote, "We just finished our first year at a new garden. The garden is deep compost mulch for beds and wood chips for pathways. Last year, we could not afford all the compost we needed, so we did small mounds where future beds will be for part of the garden. We covered this area 50 by 50 feet in the spring with black tarp and grew winter squash, cucumbers, and melons through holes we cut in the tarp. About 12% of the squash was decimated by squash bugs and another 10% was affected but still produced. We have removed the tarps for the winter so we can finish the beds and to let as much moisture as possible in as it snows. 1. The tarping really set back the bindweed crop, so we want to tarp the area again next season. From what I've read about squash bugs, the tarping next year will give them habitat, and they should be a larger problem than they were this year. Is there anything we can do now to reduce the squash bug populations for next season? The garden is a 1/4 acre surrounded by grassy meadow and a stand of conifer trees about 50 feet to the east. Number 2. Assuming we are stuck with the squash bugs next year, are there other crops you would recommend growing in that tarp that would have similar spacing to winter squash so we don't have to make more holes in the tarp and would not be affected by squash bugs? Number 3, do you have recommendations for hoe styles that work best for wood chip pathways? How about 1 to 2 inch straw mulch on compost in the beds? We use straw to regulate soil temperatures in the summer and remove it for fall, winter, and spring. We are open to other top mulches as well to keep the soil cooler in the summer, but would prefer not to do shade cloth. For context, Zone 6A, high desert, half our annual precipitation is snow. Summer high temperatures get to low 100 degrees Fahrenheit, frost-free from about mid-May to about mid-September. We are not certified organic and do not plan to get that designation, but follow organic practices as much as possible. We have overhead watering and drip tape, depending on the area of the garden. Thanks for doing the show. End quote. Okay, so thank you for this fun set of questions, Fuller Gardeners. Obviously, there is a lot in there, but I'm going to just knock out question number 3 really quickly and then work my way back up to number 1. There's not a hoe style that works well in wood chips. Wood chips are the worst when they get weeds. The only real option is a spade-like shovel and or more wood chips. Yeah, the one nice thing about bare pathways is they are easy to clean and cultivate. Living pathways are all weeds, so at least they're sincere and you just mow them. But with wood chips or straw, you just have to hand weed them, which is annoying. Now, you should have fewer weeds in general, and especially if you put a weed barrier down before you put the wood chips or straw or whatever. So although the weeds are hard to get out, there should be fewer of them, and so that will be a little bit more manageable. As for the question about crops with similar spacing to winter squash, there's not much that is planted at the typical winter squash spacing, which can be anywhere from 3 feet to 8 feet, depending on your space and the crop you're growing. Otherwise, you could consider just really wide spacing on some tomatoes or peppers or eggplant or something like that. May not be the best use of that space, but they certainly won't complain. They will actually probably do really well for you. Now, on the question of managing for squash bugs, here's what I would recommend and what I do for our squash bug-free squash. First, since you've been having trouble, consider a year with hybrid squashes. For the uninitiated, hybrid does not refer to genetic engineering. It's just a cross between two varieties with a known outcome, and the hybrid vigor may come in handy. Next, start them indoors in really good potting soil. Make sure the blocks are not touching each other and that they get really consistent moisture. They need to grow until they have their first true leaves, about, 3 weeks, give or take. When you plant them, add a small amount of compost to the base of the plant. Remember, squash loves the compost pile for a reason. Squash digs that serious fertility. Also, be careful when planting to not disturb the roots. Like seriously, that will set them back a lot. So be gentle. That goes for all cucurbits. They do not like their roots messed with. Then as soon as they are transplanted, water them in really well and cover them with insect netting. Not row cover, as it will be too hot. It has to be insect netting. Do not remove the netting until they begin to flower, at which point they should be tall enough to deliver a healthy crop. Good, healthy soil will help, obviously, but sometimes it's just about giving the plants enough time to get established and start rolling. Be on the lookout for squash bug eggs on the bottom of the leaves and scratch them off if you see them. That said, I've seen squash bug eggs on plants that never got squash bugs. Not sure if the eggs or babies were eaten or something, but I still will scrape them off if I see them, and I will also spray a compost tea if I see them, just to give the plants a little boost before a potential, infestation. Anyway, I hope that was helpful as you're planning your squash for next season, everyone. Tarping or no tarping, tall grass, previous existence of squash bugs. In my experience, none of that matters if you do the stuff that I mentioned there above correctly. Also, of course, rotate the area where you are growing crops as much as you can. That will absolutely make a huge difference. Otherwise, I'll wrap it up there. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and to the team at No Till Growers for their support. I will not be here again until Monday, at which point I will probably have lots of fun stories to regale you with from my adventures in farm nerdery. So get ready. This is the last farm event that should interrupt our hangout time here on the podcast this winter, I think. If you gain some value from this show, consider joining the 800 plus people over at patreon.com/no-till-growers to help throw in where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of December, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today too. Okay, so we got our weeklies, Maina, Byron Green, and Stephen Smith, who are going to be joined by Peter Langlands. That's a cool name. Dwayne T, Alex and Oliver, and EB, or it could be Eb. Eb. So this one is actually a Battle of the Bands story. Obviously, the weeklies versus Peter, Dwayne, Alex, and Oliver, and EB, called the P-Dubs. The P-Dubs, which is not super clever. It's just kind of a combination of all their names. But anyway, they had a Battle of the Bands, and wouldn't you know it, that they actually beat the weeklies. And I'm sorry to the weeklies, but they were state champs there in Idaho for 25 years. So, it was a long time that they had their reign, but it gave them a chip on their shoulder. That was kind of the kick in the butt they needed, the weeklies, to get back to where they were as a Battle of the Band contestant in Idaho. So, I think it's one of those stories that's just, it's motivational, and it and then honestly, like, no aliens attacked. So I feel like it was a win. All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you Monday. Have a great week and a weekend. Bye.